Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I'm Stuart, and you're tuned in to another episode of The Practice. Episode 41, coming to you from a gray, cloudy, dreary day in San Francisco, California. But that's all right. Good day to be inside, getting some cool work done. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Before we get started on this week's topic, which, based on what's up on the screen, I think everyone has a fairly good guess as to what that would be. But I wanted to share some good news in that the short film that I've been working on for the better half of, or I guess the better half of this year so far, and a little bit of last year actually, is finally live. It's called Look to the Sea. It's a 4-minute animated short. It's a fairly minimal kind of melancholy aesthetic, and sort of a quiet, sad little piece. Yeah. I'm really pleased to, well, speaking frankly, I'm really pleased to sort of be done with it. I've been staring at it for months and months, and I think it ended up in a pretty good spot. It was sort of my first, you know, longer than 3 or 4 minute animation. Certainly the first sort of narrative arc I've told like that wasn't a concise music video. I think there's definitely a lot that I learned along the way. I think. There's certain bits here and there that could potentially be improved upon, but for a first effort, I'm quite proud of it, and it's a bit of an experimental aesthetic for me as well, in that it wasn't just a simple rendering straight from Cinema 4D. We did these really sort of low cost hardware GPU renderings, and then each frame was drawn on by hand in Photoshop. So there's just hundreds of hours of retouching and digital painting associated with that look too. So it was fun, and I'm super proud and pleased to have it out in the world. My good buddy from high school, Dave Pettibone, was kind enough to do the score and the sound effects and design the sound for me. So super pleased with how it came together. It's on my social media channels and on my YouTube page. So please check out Look to the Sea. Let me know what you think. Share it with a friend. It was a labor of love. It took a long time. So please let me know what you think. So in terms of the offering for this week's stream, I think we're gonna round out our series of crazy, sort of wacky taxidermied animal heads. If we're gonna do a series of things, I think we need to do at least three. Three's a crowd, as they say, and I think odd numbers always work really nicely for pairings, for groupings, so to speak. So we'll be working on the number 3 for this series today. And since we've got an antelope and a yeti kind of a guy, I was thinking that it might be cool to do kind of a predator, some sort of cat. And I was doing a little bit of a search around on Google this morning before we clicked start on the stream, and I found this kind of disturbing, but also kind of hilarious in a way, reference of a leopard head. So I think we're going to roll with this one today, at least for sort of base inspiration for the mesh. So let's get into it. Yeah, Source is in this chat. Hello, Source. Had a busy art day, huh? Good. Glad to hear it. Hopefully we're keeping people inspired and fired up. Hello to you. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but hello. Thank you for joining. For those who haven't tuned in before, I guess as I'm getting started, I should say that The Practice is a live, unrehearsed, unedited look at my workflow, and sort of warts and all. It's not always perfect. Sometimes we need to find workarounds, and we have little errors and issues we need to overcome, but that's all part of the fun. It's sometimes challenging to do it unrehearsed and unpracticed, and it's not always the most perfect, polished, smooth tutorial style video that you're going to get, but it's fun that way. That's the way I like to do it, and I enjoy sort of operating on the fly and creating stuff live for you guys. So without further ado, let's jump in and start modeling this guy. Ooh, this actually gives us a couple other points of view. All right, so let's start blocking it out. As we typically do, best to start with really simple shapes and just start blocking them out. like I always say at roundabout this part of the stream is, please jump in the chat. I love getting some conversation going. Text going. Oh, that's a connect, not a symmetry. Dang, things look so similar. So yeah, so get in the chat, say what's up, let the community know what you're working on. If you got a link to recent work or something you want to share, drop it in the chat. Maybe I'll even fire it up and bring it up on my screen. Always curious to see what everyone's working on, and I really hope that the practice can be a way to keep people motivated and inspired and making cool stuff and sharing their work with the community and pushing everyone along, keeping the evolution happening and pushing forward sort of everyone's efforts, collectively in the creative space. So get at me, show me what you're working on. Oops. I'm sort of working on forming this kind of snout, um, which will then open up, of course. Man, so it's funny to say. I mentioned it earlier. It's kind of crazy to say, and I am proud of the thing, but man, it's kind of a relief to be done with that short film. It was a lot of effort and it was a lot of retouching, and man, at times my eyes were just getting sick and sore, I should say. I was you know, just staring at something for so long. You sort of you almost forget what it looks like. You become, it's difficult to judge objectively. You're just so close to the thing. I guess I'm lucky that my wife is also, she's a graphic designer. She's also a visually, talented person. She works, and creates visuals for a living. So it was fun and super useful to have her around to bounce ideas off of. But frankly speaking, I think she was getting a little bit sick of it too. So it's a bit of a relief. It's a bit, but I guess it's slightly bittersweet in a sense. But it's nice to have it out in the world. I'm fairly proud of it, and I can't wait to hear what everyone thinks of it. So check it out. Hey Talos, thanks. I think Talos dropped a nice comment on that short film yesterday. So thanks for that, man. Appreciate it. And thanks, Source, for getting the chat fired up. I love it when you guys, some episodes are chattier than others, but I love it when you guys get in there and you're all sharing links and ideas and everything like that. I feel like it makes this, you know, a useful exercise. I had a feeling this wasn't really going to work because we've got this intersecting geometry, which typically the bools don't like. That's weird. Oh, I still got the other one. That's why. Liked it a little better than I thought it might, although that's not perfect, certainly. Hello. We got the international contingency in the chat today. That's awesome. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and stopping by. Frequently adding a bit of subdivisions, adding a few subdivisions helps a bool out. Oops, not doing great here. Let's see. I think I'm just going to use this for now to sort of flesh out some of my shapes, but I'm going to go in and clean this up a little bit later. Looking at that reference, I think this probably is a bit too thick. We probably want to take these spheres in a little bit more to kind of create a snout. Yeah, maybe. Tiger? Leopard? Perhaps. I think a shape that works super well in a lot of organic forms, certainly for the neck, is to create a cone, kind of open up the top a little bit. We won't need all those subdivisions up there. And you throw some rounding on it, and all of a sudden you got this really nice organic shape that tapers slightly, which you can start using for all sorts of things. See, it looks like a thick, muscular neck. Oh my, what a thick neck you have. For those who haven't seen previous weeks, here's two of the critters that we've worked on in the past. I think in a little bit, once I get a little further along with the flesh, with the sort of blocking things out, I'll probably grab a few of these elements just to maintain some consistency. But we'll have this sort of wooden plaque that the head is mounted on, a little sort of nameplate here. And I guess, one of the fun things we did in previous weeks is I asked everyone in the chat to help come up with a name for these creatures. We had, what was this guy's name last week? Chilomus radicus. We had Capra corruptus. And these all came from suggestions in the chat. So as you're watching me work here, and if there's something springs to mind as a cool name for this leopard, I definitely like some suggestions. Hey, Riso, thanks for stopping by. Yes, I have made a 3D animation. It's funny you mentioned. I just finished my first animated short. It's about 4 minutes long. There's plenty of animations that I've completed out there in the world, but in terms of a singular sort of narrative story arc, my first true animated short was just completed recently. It's called Look to the Sea. It's on my YouTube channel. Please check it out. I'd love to hear what you think of it. Took many, many months to complete. What if, I wanted to make these guys each have a slightly unrealistic or fantastical look to it. I wonder if giving this leopard a goofy overbite will sort of help in that regard. I don't know. We'll see. We'll keep blocking it out. So that's a good question, Source. Yeah, sometimes I will sort of, put constraints on myself or, work in a certain medium. Like a lot of times when I'm trying to get ideas out, I'll just work in pen on paper. And since you can't really erase or rework pen, that sort of has its own constraints and sort of forces you to think in a certain way. It can be very positive to put constraints on yourself and work within a certain modality that you think will help elicit a certain type of work. It doesn't always work, but it's I think it's useful at times to try different techniques to try and you know get the wheels turning or break you out of a little bit of a creative funk or a rut. So yes, I would say that can be a useful exercise. I've never worked in Octane. In fact, I try to keep things fairly simple in terms of rendering engines, but that's something I may explore one day. I'm also thinking of the I do most of my 3D modeling work from my MacBook, which is slightly ridiculous. I think a lot of serious career 3D artists would kind of scoff at knowing that I do so much work, or essentially all of my work directly from an Apple laptop. In a lot of ways, that sort of informed my style. I try to keep things simple, fairly low poly. Definitely don't use tons of reflections or crazy GI settings or anything like that, just because I'm always in an effort to, I'm always making an effort to keep things sort of minimal and not too expensive in terms of, rendering needs. But when I get a couple payments in for my next few freelance projects, I am thinking about investing in a more serious, rig. I think I'm going to get a gaming tower with a serious graphics card, and that I think will help me explore, alternative rendering engines and get into some heavier processing sort of stuff. But I'm also really excited about, the world of VR, and there's applications like Tilt Brush and Medium, and not to mention all kinds of other cool games and experiences that are, just really, really exciting. So hopefully we'll see, but maybe in the next couple of months here, I'll start live streaming some Medium or some Tilt Brush illustrations, and I can, share some VR creation techniques with you, which is something that I'm super, super excited about doing more of. So yeah. So this is, coming together a little bit, starting definitely have the building blocks in place, starting to feel like a bit of a leopard. Let's see here, this might be a bit high. So is this kind of like a jawbone? Yeah. Yeah, no worries, Source. Glad you checked it out. Glad you found it useful. See, creating this upper sort of jaw shape with a bool instead of by expanding the geometry has allowed me to keep it a little bit more flexible. As you can see, like I can still adjust the width of this cylinder, sort of tweak things around, even though this is kind of janky geometry at this point, which I can clean up or cover up if I'm feeling lazy. Hey, Surin, thanks for popping by again. Appreciate it. Always a big supporter. So maybe we look at doing some ears now. I think for that, let's try one of these Bezier boys. It's definitely going to be the first leopard ear I've ever modeled. I can sort of figure this out. Yeah, it's a start. We can always tweak it later. Big start. I do like the way in our example image the ears are sort of set back, which I think is what cats do when they're pissed. A bit of an aggressive there of kitty there. So you can see what I did. Again, trying to keep things flexible. Just using a cloth NURBS, cloth surface to give some depth to that Bezier object. Don't feel like expanding it yet because there's still more to do, and I might want to change it. You know. Hmm. So you often make things low poly or cartoonish. A little bit. Sometimes I'll do things a little bit more realistic, and I used to do stuff like that a little bit more often. But I found honestly that there are so many other people who are really good at that realistic stuff, and um, it doesn't it doesn't excite me as much as creating stylized, cartoonish, if you will, characters and creatures and creations. And it's sort of a personal style that I've come into that I really not only do I enjoy making, but I think I've become a little bit known for it, so to speak. I think for a lot of creative professionals, especially illustrators and animators and folks like that, it can be really useful to have a recognizable style. Um, it's good often to to sort of differentiate yourself, of course, but to um, gosh, how do I want to say this? I'm not being particularly articulate this morning, but yeah, if you're not competing with other people's strengths, then a lot of times you can focus more on your own. Let's put it that way. So, not only is it a way of differentiating myself, but I think it's also sort of an inherent strength that I have. I come from a graphic design and illustration background, so I think simplifying shapes and doing stylistic interpretations of things is sort of where my training is and sort of what I enjoy doing. And also to my earlier point about, you know, doing most of my work from a fairly low powered CPU. I mean, it's a decent computer, but as far as 3D professionals go, it's not a very powerful rig. And that I think, I wouldn't say it prohibits me, but it certainly discourages me from doing, really high poly stuff or things with glossy reflections or transparencies and things like that. I like to try and keep things fairly simple and straightforward. So hope that answers your question. Hey Candy, thanks for stopping back in again. Lots of folks in the chat. I really appreciate that. Oh great, thanks Candy. Yeah, there should be more coming. I think we're not quite up in the Play Store yet, but there will be an app called Vicarious that I worked on that will be up in the Google Play Store for all you Google Daydream users quite soon. And after that, it'll hopefully be up on the Gear VR platform, so you'll be able to check that out as well. All right, so I think it's time for some teeth. Obvious place to start. Big nasty teeth. Another cone. And now, a nice sharp tooth is good, but a little bit more realistic, I think, to round it off just a hair, which is what this leopard has anyway. So I'm going to kind of do that. Right? Still sharp enough to bite you in half. All right. Also looks like these guys have a gentle curve to them, and I'm gonna go ahead and do something different than what I just described to you guys, and I'm gonna expand this and just go ahead and alter the geometry itself. I could do this with sort of a one of these modifiers and do a bend deform on it or something like that, but I'm kind of terrible at using those things. So I'm just going to put a gentle curve on this tooth using the soft selection tool. Now we're getting toothy with it. I think I may use that the cloth nerve tool again, just to add a little thickness to this lower jaw here. I wonder if I should bring it in. Yeah, I think I'll bring it in. There we go. Yeah, if you paint in real life or in Photoshop, right? I think there will be a lot of carryover. The cool thing about the difference between traditional medium and digital medium is that the what makes the image strong is independent of the medium. I've said this on, on previous streams, but you can make really awesome stuff with crayons. Like you don't need an expensive computer and fancy software to make awesome art. You can do it with a $30 watercolor set from an art supply store and a little bit of decent paper. You can do it with somewhat cheap markers. You can do it with a simple pen and ink. Like there's some amazing illustrators out there who do stuff with just like ballpoint pens, So don't let the medium get in the way of making awesome stuff. It's so much more about how you develop your eye and the types of images you like to make and the storytelling techniques you have potentially. There's so much that goes into making a quality image that has nothing to do with the medium you're operating within or the the specific techniques or tools themselves. I think it's really common for artists starting out to get really caught up in what the professional tools that everyone are using are. And it's good to pay attention to that stuff to a certain extent. Tools can make your job easier on you. They can affect what you create to a certain extent, but the entirety of what you create is not dependent at all upon the tools you use, but much more so the eye that you develop for yourself, and the composition, the texture, the contrast, the use of color. There's just so much stuff that goes into making a good image that has nothing to do with technology or tools at all. These teeth are feeling a little bit weird, to be honest. I wonder if I need to adjust this snout a bit. It's always a push and pull with this sort of thing. Now what would happen? I'm going to break this thing. Let's see what happens. Not sure how this is going to work. Oop. Take this. Oh, boy. Cloth nerves. Making stuff up as I go here, guys. I don't know if this is going to work well. Fairly janky. Oops. Yeah, I'm not sure what kind of difference that makes. I think what we're missing is sort of gums for these teeth to sit in. So what I'm going to do is create a spline that turns into gums. Hmm. Go. All right. Getting there, getting there. You know, the Yeti came together so quickly last week, it's almost not surprising that this guy would take a little bit longer. Sometimes the proportions just don't come together quite right. That's another thing, as I was talking about, you know, making stuff with crayons and not needing necessarily high-end art equipment to make cool stuff. A big part of that is proportions, guys. Proportions, proportions, proportions. They're so important in, you know, making stuff look right. The relationship of one thing to another is really, you know, what's going to create the look for that thing. If some people might know about color theory, and part of color theory states that you know, the way a color is perceived has a lot to do with the colors that are around it, right? So if you've got a green dot on a yellow field, it's going to look different than a green dot on a red field. They're just the colors are going to interact differently. Furthermore, if you have a bunch of sharp, pointy things, you know, they're gonna contrast with a bunch of rounded elements, and you wanna look at the contrast and the difference there, and what kind of, you know, visual effect that creates. I think a really important thing is proportion, right? Like we could give this, you know, we could give this leopard guy all kinds of different shapes and sizes to his facial features, but they're not gonna feel right necessarily. Like, I don't know, looks like a fat, stupid cat now. That's because his neck is way out of proportion. Same thing here. Like, how terrible would it look? Let's find that eye, right? And the cat looks silly. Actually, not too bad. But yeah, look, see, he looks silly because his eyes are way too small. They're out of proportion, right? Cats have pretty big eyes. So really taking your time and working with proportions, and sometimes depending on the artistic effect you want to achieve, you want to exaggerate those proportions and make them unrealistic, right? But that's the type of stuff that really defines the look of a piece, without having anything to do with the medium it's in or the quality of the ingredients, so to speak. So I'm going to group our lower jaw and open it up just a little bit more. Right, exactly. Source. That's a spot on comment. It's not. I mean, especially, you know, for people who are really into 3D work and know the difference between certain rendering engines, maybe that makes the difference. But for the general art consuming public, they don't care. They don't care if it's oil or tempera or gouache. They just want to look at the picture. You know what I mean? And it's fine for us, you know, for us artistic folks to care about the mediums and the techniques we use. That makes sense, but that's for us. That's not really typically for the art consuming public. They don't really care as far as I'm concerned, and that's why, you know. Luckily, I don't get the question as much as I used to. It used to kind of drive me nuts. People, well, what software to use? What software to use? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what software I use. Also, use Google. What the hell, you guys? Come on. Just Google 3D software. Who do you rate as an artist who inspires you, 3D or other medium? Oh man, there's a lot of really great artists out there that inspire me. Just to rattle off a few, there's a local San Francisco artist named Ferris Plock whose work I really really like. I think one of the greatest artists living and operating in the world today is a guy called Aryz, Aryz. He's a Spanish muralist, and His work is incredible, especially the scale at which he works. Just absolute destroyer. In terms of other 3D artists, I really like Julian Glander. His work's quirky and funny. It's a great example of how having high-end techniques doesn't really matter if what you're making is cool and interesting. Um, let's see what other 3D artists. Oh, back to traditional medium. There's an artist called AJ Fossick, who actually the work we're doing today is a little bit like the work he does. He does these crazy animal heads made out of wood and spray paint and nails and stuff. Incredible. Fossick. AJ Fossick. Amazing, amazing artist. Love his work. Super inspiring. There's El Mac, who's another muralist. I got a lot of my inspiration early on, in particular, from graffiti and street art. That was one of the first sort of mediums, let's say, or the first types of art that I was really into. Um, so I think stylistically, I'm influenced a little bit there, and that's what led me to graphic design school. You know, it's lettering, it's typography, and I wanted to see if I could make a living doing something visual, but also knowing that I kind of enjoyed making lettering. And it's not something I do as much anymore. You'll see it in some of my work. And maybe I'll do a lettering live stream at some point in the future. But yeah, graffiti really, in a lot of ways, is responsible for where I'm at now in my career. And so I still draw a lot of inspiration from sort of street art and graffiti style artists, and a lot of the folks I just named really sort of come from that school. But what's great about today is that the internet brings just so much art ready to view right to our eyes. It's amazing. When I was first starting out, I'm trying to think. When I was in high school, I believe is when my dad first got our. This may sound crazy to some of you guys, but a Gateway 2000, uh, this big beige monster of a computer with dial-up AOL internet access, slow as hell, and I was able to look at some artwork through that, but it's nothing like what folks today have access to with things like Instagram and Twitter, and it's amazing. I'm constantly inspired every day. There's this huge influx constantly of amazing work to look at. It's really quite a time to be alive as an artist. And not only can you appreciate and look at other artists' work, but it's really easy to connect with them and share techniques and see what they're working on. And it's an amazing world out there for sure. Great question. Great question. I guess it's also worth mentioning while I'm talking about my background and history a little bit is that um, my mom is a really really talented artist, and I think in a lot of ways she's encouraged me to pursue the arts. She's a traditional painter. She does a lot of oils and pastels. She does a lot of still lives and landscapes, and is has really 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 talented artist who has gallery representation in my hometown of Doylestown, PA. She is constantly putting out great work and has come to be fairly well respected in the community that she operates within. Sells a ton of paintings, and although it's not, to be perfectly honest, it's not the style of work that I'm super super excited about. It's definitely got me started on the right foot. She definitely encouraged artistic pursuits in the house, and there was always, you know, crayons and paper and colored pencils for us to play with as kids. So that was really, really great. kind of going away from the reference here a little bit, just making the toothy mouth that I want to see. A lot of times I'd use a cloner for this kind of thing, but since we're dealing with a lot of different teeth shapes, teeth shapes, whatever, I'm just doing it by hand. Takes a little longer, but it's okay. That's okay. Now that is a toothy mouth. It might be time to do some test renderings. Maybe grab a few elements in terms of lighting and stuff like that from the older models. I'm feeling that. I think, like I said, proportions, it's blocked out. It's feeling okay. I might need to draw a little nose on there. In fact, let's do that. I'm going to bust out Illustrator because a lot of times with shapes like these, at least for me, it's a little bit easier to work from Illustrator directly. Oops. Join. That's a fairly good start. I'm going to zero that out. Save nose. Extrude that bad boy in just a matter of moments. Got a cat nose. So making the rear cap a little larger to give you sort of that tapering effect. What I can also do is adjust the position of it. So push down a little bit. And there's still some fairly janky geometry inside of the mouth. Making some slight adjustments here. The ingenuity of the artist is different from his predispositions, is it not? I think it is. I'm not sure if I understand your question exactly, but I think the ingenuity of the artist should surpass the medium he works in. If you see an artist doing something clever in 3D, I would hope that they could do something clever with a pen. Not always the case. Sometimes the work is very much of the medium it's created within, and that's okay too. You know, all of the stuff I ramble on about is really just one man's opinion, and can certainly be taken with a grain of salt. But, you know, I have been a professional commercial artist for more than 10 years, and I've been drawing and painting and creating my entire life, so I feel like I do have a little bit of a leg to stand on, so to speak, a bit of experience, and I enjoy sharing with you. Enjoy sharing it with you all. But it is, you know, it's subjective. Art is subjective, bottom line. So it can be a lot of things to a lot of different people, and there's no one right answer, and that, you know, that's part of what's so exciting and cool about it. All right, so I think, you know, the base mesh is feeling pretty good. The proportions feel pretty right. He's fairly solid. I think he's got maybe just enough detail, at least from a base mesh perspective, to really get going on some of the other elements. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to open up last week's and borrow a few things from it. I'm going to grab the lighting and the wall and the plaque and a few other little things. So let's start with the plaque. Plaque and name and wall. Just copy, paste that in. What I'm going to do is, actually, let's do this. Kind of zero this stuff out. Just adjusting the neck here so the angle gets the head far enough away from the wall to feel right. Somewhere in here, perhaps. Whoops, what is going on there? I think part of what unifies this set, and also what feels kind of cool, is these really simplified, scaly kind of fur shapes. So I'm gonna try and interject a few of those into this model as well, probably along the neck and like around the eyes here. So let's give that a shot. Let's also, while we're thinking about it, let's grab the lighting from here, paste that right in, do a quick little rendering, quick little test render. Oh, also, come on, guys, let's come strong with some name suggestions. What are we gonna call this guy? feeling better already with some of that lighting in there. And I know that I think one of these lights is probably on the wrong side given our current perspective. So let's adjust that. I also think let's get the aspect ratio the same as the other, which I think was square format. Almost positive. I would put 1800 by 1800. All right. Definitely square format. But I'm not going to go that large just yet because we're doing test rendering. So let's call it 1200 by 1200. Should render fairly quickly, I hope, here. So the others are called, one's called Capra corruptus. That's this guy. The other guy is called, oh shoot, I forget his name. Chilomus radicus. Since he's a Yeti, I guess that's like a radical cold kind of name. And this guy's like a goat, like a Capra, like Capricorn, I think is sort of Latin for goat. What I like about these is they have a sort of a scientific Latin feeling kind of name, right? It's like, it's got that scientific feel to it a little bit. So I think it'd be nice to follow suit with that a little bit. Cream Puff. That's a good name. I like that. Cream Puff. He looks like a cream puff, doesn't he? Cream puff that could bite your face off. So let's get into texturing a little bit. What do you say? Let's get it going. Oops. Oh, that's a really good one. That's our front runner so far. Baculentus tigrio. Chubby tiger. That's fun. I'm just altering this shape a bit because I don't want them to be just the same. Each of the plaques should have a different feel. Let's see here, mesh. Chamfer. The chamfer tool is a great way to put a little bit of rounding on a spline. Hmm. All right. Hmm. So, I guess it's worth saying that for this type of rendering, where it's more of just a singular image and will be treated sort of like an illustration, and the 3D model itself isn't intended to have a life beyond just helping to create an image. It's okay that I'm being a little bit sort of sloppy with the mesh itself. If this were to be a model for like game production or VR application or whatever it is, if the 3D model needed to be a part of the final output, then we would really want to go in and clean some of this up. We've got tons of geometry that's just sort of intersecting and hidden inside of the head, and it's not a perfect, clean, crisp model in that regard. And it's fine for our purposes right now, but just worth noting that this wouldn't be like considered a production ready model. And I think a lot of 3D artists would probably sort of scoff at the way I put some of this stuff together, but whatever. I don't care. So what I'm doing here is, you can see sort of the furriness around the ears and around this sort of cheek area. I'm not going to go in and render a bunch of hair, but I want to get some of that broken up outline. I want to create a little bit of like a textured, bristly effect. And I'm just doing that with these really simple capsule tops, which I think works pretty well. And it's also helpful in keeping with the style we've established with the other animal heads in this series. So keep after it. Now this one's a little bit interesting. I know he's got a little bit of hair on his chin, which might be nice to reproduce, but we're definitely going to have to alter the model to a certain extent, or alter the cloner, so we can get kind of a nice whisker effect. That's going to take a little bit of pushing and pulling, so let's figure that out now. So I kind of like that in terms of how it sits underneath. Angle it back to continue sort of hugging the contour of that chin. Then what I'm going to do, but first I'm going to make a copy of these because I like to keep a backup. So I'm going to throw these in a group, call it off, misspelled obviously. And now I've got a copy of them, which is good. And I'll do this a lot of my models. Just have a null set to off that I call off, and then I can keep a backup of things. Now I'm going to expand these, delete most of these capsules, but I might want to come back to that unexpanded object. We want to make things easier on ourselves in the long run. Bam. Yeah, I kind of like that. You see the texture that it adds? I think that works for us. Huh. Got a little something peeking through the gums. I'm going to kind of get down and dirty. Just use a soft selection and grab some points and bury that stuff. And again, fine for our purposes, not the cleanest of approaches for 3D modeling, but will work for our purposes. Not a peep from the Twitch chat. You guys are boring. Hmm. Lips, the gums rather, feel a little bit overkill, to be honest, with that red color. So I'm going to make them a little bit darker. And I'm going to make, especially this lower one, a little bit smaller. Which it looks like exposed a bit more of that guy. That's all right. We know how to take care of that. I love the way cinema will remember the point selections or the individual selection mode selections depending on the object you grab. So I love how that's preserved. We can just go back in and quickly change that. Now what happened there? What just happened? Looks like I turned off somehow the symmetry objects. There we go. That's ultra weird. Hmm. Oh, cool. Yeah, share what you're working on, Source. That's neat. Cool. Getting some stripes going. Hmm. is going to be a fairly intense looking eye, I have a feeling, just based on the color we're using. But look at the size of the eye on that cat. They tend to have really large eyes. I mean, predators categorically have large eyes because they need to see the things they're going to eat. I know I've said this on previous episodes, but prey animals typically have their heads oriented to the side with their pupils facing out so that they have a really wide range of view. And predators typically have their eyes at the front of their head with a largely overlapping, a more narrow but more overlapping field of view. And that gives them much better depth perception, which is important if you're chasing something down trying to eat it, right? All right. So I think I went a little too large on some of that stuff in the eye, so I'm going to adjust that. Oops. Turn off soft selection. Make the pupil a little smaller. I'm going to turn this back to the eye color because that's going to work a little better for us. And I have no idea why it did that. That is the weirdest. What you doing, cinema? What you doing? That is so weird. Okay. Now you've behaved yourself. Thank you. I wanted a little bit more of the white of that eye exposed. I think another thing to do is turn it out just slightly. There we go. Ferocious. It's also feeling a bit dark in the mouth, so I think I'm going to adjust the position of the lights a bit. Yes, this guy's a bit far out too. Let's see what that gets us. I'm just going to go ahead and interrupt our rendering. All right, I'm gonna hit another rendering, and then let's check out what sources got. Cool, man. Nice. Is this a world generator? What do you call it? World maker? World builder? What is that uh, terrain generation tool called? And then how'd you achieve this coloration? Is that like gradient maps in Photoshop? Looks cool. I would say if I can offer a little bit of a critique, I would say perhaps you can use the color or the lightness and darkness to create a little bit more of a focal point for yourself. I feel like it's, and maybe this is what you're after, but this has a pretty even overall feel to it. There's a couple spots of dark, but the color and the texture and the lightness and darkness is fairly consistent throughout. So maybe taking this, spaceship looking thing and making that lighter or a different color will help it pop out from the background. Just a thought. World Machine, that's what's called. But otherwise, looking really cool. Thanks for sharing. And I'd like to, in future weeks and as we move forward with the practice, I'd love if, maybe there's like a short segment we do every week where we just, share a couple links, see what the rest of the community is working on, and get some feedback, and yeah, could be fun. So. We're about an hour and a half into the stream now, so we should be looking to really put the finishing touches on this. Man, he's looking pretty fierce. Pretty fierce. Which I'm liking. And I didn't, on the lighting update, I didn't get as much as I would have liked to. We do have GI on. Let's see, I may have turned the gamma up. Yeah. So let's turn that gamma up to 1.5. That's going to give us a little bit more. The gamma really has to do with like the midtones in the lighting and the distance sort of the light will bounce, especially in the mid-range. So that will have the light sort of go further, basically, is a simple way of looking at that. All right, let's try again. And you can see it's a little bit brighter already, and I think most of that has to do with the gamma. Go hair lighter on this as well, on the gums at least. Man, those eyes are vicious. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So that's all just with an HDRI with a gradient on it. It's cool. It's a cool effect. The color is pretty sweet. Now we're getting quite close on this one. I'm liking the shape of everything. I think the expression is really neat. I think we just need a little bit more interest in terms of color. Maybe a few more color details, a few little things here I think will take it further and make it a little bit more interesting. So where are those ears? There are the ears. Hmm. Push those colors a little bit further, get a little bit more contrast. That's helping a bit. I'm going to try something real quick because it looks like this, this guy, he's got really dark gums and lips, as do a lot of these predators. Like, look at the color of those lips. That's fairly pink. Look at those lips. All these cats have. Really dark. Let's see what that gets us. Might be a bit more leopard-like. And since this is an overall fairly warm color palette with these browns and yellows and things that are really in the warmer part of the spectrum, it might be nice to contrast that with a little bit of a cool dark color. Huh. I do like this bit of detail over the eye. Seems to work well. Look where well, it's not exactly where we started, but before the texturing, it's always cool to see this progression. Oh, another thing, and this is a feature I only learned about recently, but with extrude objects, a lot of times you'll get kind of a nasty transition over the caps. You'll get a really hard line, and I used to expand them and put them in a connect object to get rid of that. But what I realized is you can just click create single object, and that's going to give us a much smoother transition. Huh. What do you think? Does anyone have a preference on the color of the gums? Hmm. I'm going to leave them for now. I kind of like that. Maybe even we go a little bit further into the blue range. What I also need to do is update the name of this bad boy because one of the only, and at this point the best selection we've got is Batulentus tigrio. And even though he's not a tiger, let's do it up. I guess he does have some stripes, right? I've been looking at a leopard, and I think his proportions are based more on a leopard than a tiger, but he's got stripes on him, not spots, so who am I to judge? All right. Bucculents. Yeah. Fits almost perfectly. Make this a little wider. Thank you, KNY, for the wonderful suggestion. All right, adding a bit of noise. See where that gets us. You can't really see it that well, the noise that is. So I'm going to make it a hair darker and a hair larger. Just one last bit of sort of textural detail. And I think we'll be ready to call this a rendering. Knock it out. We'll do a quick retouch and we'll call it a stream right around the 2-hour mark. It's surprising a little bit that something that feels a lot more complicated, like this guy, took a little bit less time, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour less than this lion head, this ferocious predator took. But, you know, perceived complexity doesn't always necessarily mean it was harder or easier to make, right? Yes, good eye source. That is Magic Solo. That is one of the very few cinema plugins that I use a lot, and it's very, very helpful. And what I did is I modified my palettes, my startup menu, so that it just appears right up here, and that way I can quickly isolate everything else and work on something that's overlapping or intersecting with other things. These other ones that I use a lot is this is scroll to first active, which basically means like if I've got my whole thing all collapsed and organized, I can select something and click on this, and it'll take you right to that object in the organizer, or in the, what is it called? The object menu, whatever. So right, so I can select that, bam. I can also, what I can do is instead of hitting this, I can also just hit S, and if you hit S in the viewport, it'll take you to that object. If you hit S in the object manager, it'll take you right to that object in the object manager, which is super, super helpful. The other ones I use is unfold all and fold all. So that way I can quickly collapse and organize all this stuff. It gets ugly in there sometimes. And I like to work quickly and worry about what's happening in the visuals and worry less about what's happening in my organizer. And any little tools I can use to streamline some of that workflow stuff is super, super helpful. So yeah, you know what, I'm feeling this. I think that stripe helped a lot. I think a little bit of extra darkness around here helped a bit. So I'm going to make this slightly larger. Oop, not that large. Oop, not that large. I'm going to hit render. What I'm also going to do, if you'll excuse me, is use the restroom quickly because I've been drinking coffee for like an hour and a half and I'm dying here. Be right back. Right, sorry about that. Thanks for bearing with me. Nature calls. There we have it. Awesome. You know what I'm just noticing now is that this edge is feeling a little bit dark. So I might do a little bit of a cheat move here, but who cares? Just lighten that hair. Better. Better, better. Here's a big cheat move, but I'll walk you through each of these layers just so you get a sense of how I like to retouch things. So I just dragged and dropped those from the previous layers. So what I've done here is a simple hue saturation, bumped up the saturation a little bit just to get those colors popping a little harder. The curves the curves layer, what I typically do is I go in blue and I add some blue darkness to the shadows because I really like how the shadows look when they're a little bit cooler and there's a little bit of blue added to them. And then to further contrast that effect, what I do is I go into the red channel, bump that up a little bit higher so that the highlights feel a little warmer. And of course this vibrance, I just crank the values on that just a hair because that gives us a slightly more vibrant, contrasting, colorful image. Kind of a cheat code there. But so I roll on. The other thing I'm noticing here that I'm going to take care of real quick is look at this overlap, yeah? Not ideal, but super easy to Photoshop out. So I'm just going to grab the stamp tool and make another layer. Make sure this is set to current and below. Hold Option, click to form my sample. Just kind of paint over. Yep. All right. Well, that was a fun one. I love doing crazy creatures and animal heads. It's been a while since I did a ferocious feeling vicious one. So this one was really cool. I enjoy putting big teeth in scary mouths, and these eyes are intense. I like how those came out. And I think, this sort of rounds out a really fun set. I think they sit nicely together. They do feel like a collection. So this was a lot of fun to work on. As always, thanks so much for stopping by. Love it when you guys get in the chat. Today was a really good day for that. We're sharing ideas. We're talking about what we're working on, and that's always really positive. Thanks for sharing the image you're working on, Source. I think we can make that a more routine and frequent part of the stream every week. So good thinking there. Appreciate you sharing. Yeah, so like I mentioned early on in the stream, just released "Look to the Sea," which is my first short animation, my first short film, I should say. I've done plenty of short animations before, but this is maybe the most complete, maybe the one that I've worked on the longest. And aside from a couple music videos I've done in the past, really my first sort of attempt at a narrative story arc. So please, it's on my YouTube page. I've been squawking about it all over social media. It's called "Look to the Sea." Would love it if you gave that a look. And if you like what you see, please share it with a friend. So I guess this sort of concludes another excellent week. The practice is super, super fun for me, and I hope that it's becoming a routine part of your creative lives in terms of, coming back to the table every week and working on something awesome and continuing to improve our skills and share with the community and learn and grow. It's really what it's all about. So this is Stuart signing off, saying goodbye. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.